All right, just want to let everybody know we have a very special little treat for you. As everybody knows, and for those of you who weren't in this room last night, what did we do? We took 4 people, picked them out of the audience who had acute pain, not last week, not next week, but right now, in the moment last night. We brought them up, we took their blood out, a little drop of it, and we measured it on a screen. We grounded them for only 1 hour, did the exact same thing, took their blood out, measured it on a screen, and now on the screen, we actually have the comparison between the two. You heard the testimonials last night about the diminished pain, sometimes even the elimination of pain. Now you're going to see what the blood looked like. And remember, everybody in this room right now who's grounded. Who's grounded? Everybody, who's sitting in a grounded spot and is not grounded? You're not grounded. We need a patch over here. Raise your hand if you don't have a patch in your grounding spot. Raise your hand. We need patch runs. Guy in the green shirt right there, thank you very much. Great. Very important. When you see the blood that's up here, that's the first, is that the first person or the second? Okay, this is the first person. Ungrounded blood and grounded blood. And Dave, do you want to say a little bit about the difference between what they're actually looking at right now?
Okay, so this is a sample. This is just a simple blood sample. These are red blood cells, and each red blood cell you can see on the left side is on both sides of the room, or on the right side over here, or on the left side over here, is they're agglutinated, which means they've lost what's called your zeta potential. And that's kind of like when you take 2 negatively charged sides of a magnet, you try to push them together, or 2 positively charged, there's a push away. That's called zeta potential, basically, simplifying it. So every cell should have that little bit of repellence to every other cell, but when they're deficient in electrons, then we have that agglutination. And when the electrons are available, all of a sudden, everything has its appropriate charge, and each red blood cell is kind of separate from every other red blood cell, and the charge change takes about an hour, and that's why we grounded them for at least an hour before we did the second blood test, and these are the results. Let's do the next one if we could real quickly. Look at this one. I mean, major changes here. And this is why, I mentioned it last night, I'm going to mention it again, because not everybody was here last night. If you're on blood thinner medication, you got to be careful when you ground yourself, because you're going to cut your medication in half or 3/4. It just drops it right off because it's changing radically your blood profile. I also mentioned that thyroid medication as well will be dropped off. So these are things you've got to be looking into if you're taking those kinds of things. There are natural blood thinners and natural thyroid medications, like maca is natural thyroid. Natural blood thinner, does anybody know where Coumadin comes from?
Oh, wait, is this yours?
No, that's yours.
Where was it isolated out of? It's isolated out of an herb. Tonka beans. Now, tonka beans taste like vanilla. Listen to this. I don't know if you know this story, but tonka beans taste like vanilla. And in Mexico, they were cutting a lot of these vanilla extracts with tonka bean. And so what was happening is people were getting excessively thinned out blood from taking the vanilla in their drinks and things. Isn't that a trip? So this is one of these things we got to be aware of. Let's look at the next one. Look at that. So in every case, we see that the zeta potential is restored within an hour. Now, this question comes up quite a bit. It's a very good question. How long do you need to be grounded a day? Of course, that was the first question I asked Clint when I first met him. As much as you can. That's the answer, as much as you can. But we know at least an hour is going to give you results like this, at least an hour. But really, it's as much as you can. If you can be grounded 24 hours a day, great. If you can't, you just do the best you can. And that's where this whole sleeping technology came from. You know, how did Clint come up with the idea of putting people on grounded sheets? Well, he realized, okay, when are people actually going to do this? When they're not going to be doing anything else. That's how this whole idea came about. All right, what do we got here?
We are completely sold out of the king sheets, by the way. And we have a lot of people saying, well, I only want a king sheet. Listen. A king sheet is a queen sheet with this much extra added onto it. That's the only difference. So it doesn't really make much of a difference. If you use my grounding optimization kit, you won't need it because you'll just pin this down to your bed. It won't make any difference at all. So those of you watching the stream, there's over 500 people who are trying to order a king sheet. Do not worry. We have a lot of people texting about that. Do not worry. If you have a queen sheet, it will work fine. You will be just as grounded. And another thing about these slides that's really important, I'm going to keep reiterating this. Your blood is the same as their blood. I could have picked out anybody. I could have picked out everybody. Taken the blood out before and after, we would have gotten the same response. If you have a patch on right now, raise your hand if you have a patch on right now. Your blood is becoming like that in this moment. And again, I want to just say one other thing, because this is important. I had a few people say yesterday, while I was grounded for 10 minutes, I didn't notice anything. Again, if you're completely chronically dehydrated, right, you haven't drank water ever, you start drinking a lot of water, you're not going to notice any difference. They take your blood out. Actually, you are so much healthier because your body's hydrated, right? You have a lot more power in the body, but whether or not you feel it or not, it doesn't matter. It's there, and you're actually going to be helping yourself over the long term. So I just wanted to say a thing about the sheets. We only have queens left, and again, there's no difference with the grounding optimization kit.
Do we love Sola? Was that the best ever? So we were hanging out over there in Iceland. We stayed there for a week, 10 days, something like this. We did a whole bunch of events. It was absolutely the best ever. And I love Sola because you talk to her and you say, Sola, what's going on? She says, oh, best ever. Yes, best ever by far. Like at 9 in the morning. Anyway, so we were with Sola, her husband Ellie, and their relative Kreisbjorg. It took me a long time to pronounce her name, and she's the leading herbalist in Iceland. And she goes out and she teaches young kids. Actually, kids are coming off alcohol and drugs. They have big drug problems in other parts of the world, not just here. And in Iceland as well, and alcohol problems. And she teaches these kids, when they come off that stuff, how to go into nature, how to procure wild foods, and then how to make these flower essences and herbal essences. And one of the ones that I worked on with Kreisbjorg, because we were there, we had a lot of time to share, and I said, what people really need is stress defense, right? That is a huge thing, building up the stress protection shield. So we came up with this little product right here. This is Kreisbjorg's product, not mine, but I helped develop it, and we're going to auction it off. And this is like Bach flower remedies, but even more pure. It's actually more pure because it's all done by her on the site. We were in those places where these herbs are collected, and I'm going to show you these places in the presentation later today, and it will blow your mind. There is nobody around. The purest spring water in the world, the purest ocean in the world. Phenomenal. You guys ready? All right, now if you're not in a room, okay, here we go.
Dave, before you read that, I'm actually shocked right now. I'm finding seats that have grounding technology that Clint put down himself that no one's sitting in. We have grounding patches back there. If you're sitting in a seat and there's no grounding stuff, find it. There's a bunch of seats over there. I see a bunch of seats over here. This is the most amazing technology, and if you're seated in this room right now and you're not grounded, you need to get grounded. 460 seats are grounding ready. Please find these seats. A bunch right there. Fill in these seats.
Okay.
Clint went to great expense.
Hey, if you want to sit in the front row, is anybody sitting there?
There was a lady, but this doesn't have any ground.
Oh, okay. She could just touch you. Remember that? For those of us who are new here today in the room, remember that if you are sitting in the row behind where everything is grounded, all you have to do is just reach up behind the person who's in front of you and just touch their neck like that. Give them a nice neck massage, and you are getting grounded when you do that.
All right, listen, I want to say one other thing, too. For those of you who are thinking, oh, geez, I don't know about being grounded.
Okay, I just wanted to tell all of you because last night I said, my pain had gotten a little bit better, but it still hurt when I went to bed. I went to bed and I wrapped the sheet around me, all from my lower back to my feet, and I woke up at 5, not only having 3 hours of sleep in the last 24 hours, not only rested, but my back pain was completely gone. And then this morning, after I wasn't grounded, my sciatica started to hurt. Sitting here for, 20 minutes, my sciatica pain's completely gone. So get the sheet.
Or just sit in the grounding spots, please. We got this technology for you to use it this weekend, so please avail yourself of it. Thank you.
Okay, all right. Now, I did pull out a raffle ticket to win the Superhero Protection Shield. It's like a Bach flower remedy on steroids, basically. Okay, 362-417. Did somebody win that? Do we have a winner? Come on up. This is like the Price is Right, sweetheart. Just full on. Here we go. We got to get that Price is Right music. Yeah. Cool stuff. Yeah. Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. Here, I'll take that. All right, we got a winner. Now we've got something else we're going to be auctioning off here, and that is, or raffling off, and that is this case of glacier spring water from Iceland. The spring water in Iceland is the best in the world, period. It's the purest, it's the cleanest. One of the things I'm a little bit concerned about is if you're getting water out of a spring and the spring's like over there and you're here, what if like a cow went and pooped in the water? Are you concerned about that? Or like a sheep or something? It's so cold up there. If you have cows, you got to keep them inside in the winter. There is no going outside in the winter. If you have sheep, they can't even survive out there. You have to bring them inside. So there's no animals running around pooping in the water. Is that good? 546-299. Do we have a winner? Case of spring water here, 546-299. Going once, going twice. Sold American. We are going to go 299. Okay, here we go now. Here's another one. 362-280. 362-280. Yes, yes. Claim your prize. All right. We're going to do another one. Everybody loves it when nobody claims their prize, right? They're like, yeah. 362-497. Case of spring water going once. 497 is the number. Yes? No? Oh, wow. All right. We'll keep going. Okay, here we are. 362-346. Yes. All right. Uh-oh. Let me check that number here. We have a winner. Fantastic. Congratulations.
All right, we're going to get started, dude.
Okay. All right. Now, this is a presentation I've been wanting to do for quite a while on DNA. And I was doing an interview for the Best Day Ever. This is years ago. I remember where I was. I was in my warehouse. I was in the back. When I do these interviews on the Best Day Ever, anybody ever heard these interviews? Okay, I'm usually like in the most bizarre place, like walking around a warehouse or something, like just pacing back and forth, while talking on the phone. And in this particular evening, I was doing that, and the question came up, and it was a great question, which is, what do you think about DNA? Now, I had been knee-deep, actually pretty much neck-deep into Bruce Lipton's work at the time, and his whole thing is about the cell membrane as the intelligence of the cell. And so I said DNA is overrated, and I immediately bit my tongue when I said that. I was like, ooh, I probably shouldn't have said that. And the reason why, the next thought that came through my head, and the reason why I bit my tongue is because I hadn't really read up on DNA since I was in 9th grade chemistry class. And I had a very good professor, Mr. Borden, Robert Borden. If you're watching right now, you're an amazing professor. And he took us all the way from 7th, 8th, 9th grade. He took us all the way through college, chemistry and physics and all kinds of things, and organic chemistry. And we just got accelerated learning. So some of you are wondering, how in the world do I know this stuff about minerals, about valences, orbitals, DNA, adenine, thymine, cytosine, guanine, and all that stuff? It's because of him. You can blame him. But I'm so glad. You can not even believe how powerful one good teacher can be in your life. Right? Isn't that amazing? And we were fortunate to have him for 3 years. All the folks, there was 13 of us in that particular class that had him for 3 years. And I'm going to get into reviewing some of the material he originally taught me, and then what we've learned about DNA. Now, it turns out that DNA is the site map for our biology, for the replication of our body, of the replication of different structures in our body. And it turns out that over our lifetime, the DNA damage, the lesions that show up on the DNA, can lead into accelerated aging, and in the worst situation, actually is cancer, right? Because when we have a cancer situation, what's happened is so much of our DNA has been oxidized or damaged, or what's being called now DNA lesions, that it starts replicating incorrectly, and eventually what occurs is erratic behavior of the cell, because the cell becomes genetically something different. All right, so the structure of DNA is absolutely fascinating. It's a double helix, double spiral. We'll revisit how this pattern shows up in art, right? This is Pablo Amaringo's artistic representation of a shaman's consciousness. And one of the things you see there, of course, is that DNA spiral, the loop right there. You see it showing up in here. And one of the things about this DNA shape is this ability of the shape to nest inside itself, which I'll show you more images of as we go here. This is another image of DNA. Inside that coiling are the DNA base pairs, which is this, whoops, wrong button. Here's the DNA base pairs. This stuff in the middle, you see all this stuff in the middle in here? You can see it over here. Those are the base pairs. And there's 4 of them: adenine, guanine, thymine, and cytosine. And AT, I remember this is how I learned it: ACDC, ATGC. That's how I remembered it as a kid. I still remember it today. Isn't that funny if you like connect it to something you're into? It's 9th grade. I mean, I was into ACDC at the time. I had the best time ever in Australia. I get up in front of this group in Sydney, Australia. I found out that AC/DC was on the same time tour as I was. Every city, every night. And so in this particular afternoon event in Sydney, I thought, my God, they're probably playing that night. They were. So I told Lisa, who coordinated our tour, wonderful woman, Lisa Wheeler, she's probably watching right now. She's such a superhero. I said, get me 2 tickets to AC/DC. And what happened was I got up in front of 450 people in Sydney, Australia, and I said, okay, I've got 2 tickets to AC/DC tonight. One of you is going with me, and it's not going to be a guy. That was an amazing show. Wow. We get up fine. You know how you jump the fence and all that stuff? So that has never gotten out of me, right? So we jump the fence and we get up right up to the front, and the security guard says, hey, you can't do that. I said, dude, come on. And he said, okay. We just walked right past him. It was unbelievable. So ATGC is the pairing. That's called the base pairing, and that's the code. And that code is the code of life. And if we were really going to get clever and really start advancing, we might want to start using that ATGC code for all our computers, all our electronics, instead of the binary system. And I believe eventually we're going to start patterning all of our systems, all of our thoughts, and the way we construct and create things in the world based on what is natural, right? What's in the natural world probably has been thought out a little bit more than we've thought it out. Does that make sense? Yeah, so this is something to consider for the future. Now, the DNA is defined and protected by 10 layers of water molecules that surround it, and that's the key idea that I want to share with you. The DNA is defined and protected by 10 layers of water molecules that surround it. So in this particular case, you see the strand right here, but actually around this is a layer of water molecule, another one, another one, another one, another one, another one, another one, 10 layers out, and that hydrogen that's in that water is actually what is the antioxidant that protects your DNA. That's where the electrical charge is, and that's what's helping you. So we see immediately, it doesn't take a very big leap to go to there, but we see immediately that the right kind of water actually has genetic effects on us. And that if we're going to protect our DNA for a lifetime, then we've got to make sure that that water is present. And what kind of water is it? It's the highest grade water in your whole body. Now, I've heard this from others. I've had this intuitive feeling myself. I've said it before, but I've heard it from other water experts. And my friend Nassim Haramein, anybody know Nassim Haramein? This guy's on it. And I talked to him about it. He's a neighbor of mine. And so every now and then he comes over for raw food dinner. Him and his wife, they're just about to have a baby, another baby. And every now and then they come over. And we've been talking about this. And basically your body will hold out for the water. Your DNA will hold out. So if it's like LA tap water, your body goes, this isn't going to cover it, and holds out and says, we got to hold out. And then, let's say you go and you have pretty good filtered water. Your body goes, not high grade enough. It's going to hold out. And literally, when we're dealing with cancer and DNA damage, we're dealing with dehydration. That's one of the key ideas that I wanted to get across here, in the next 20 minutes. DNA was figured out by Watson and Crick, and this is Crick over here, this man right here. Now, he was the guy who actually figured out the structure of DNA. All the pieces were there. It wasn't like they figured this out from point blank. They didn't just come from nowhere and go, it's this. There had been a lot of research leading up to this discovery. In 1923, it was discovered that you could extract certain chunks of bacteria that were smooth and put them in with bacteria that were hairy, and that chunk of that bacteria would suddenly cause genetic changes and cause the hairy bacteria to become smooth. And that really was the big insight that eventually led to their 1953 announcement about DNA. Now, this is a story that no one's going to tell you. It is apparently in Crick's autobiography. He passed on recently. And that is when he figured out the secret of life, he was high on LSD. Did you ever hear that before? And what happened was he had a vision as to the actual structure of DNA because they couldn't figure out what was going on chemically and what the structure was. And what he saw was two intertwined snakes. And then he was like, oh, it's 10. If you look at it from the top, as we'll see, it's 10-sided. And the whole structure came to him in a flash of brilliance. And this is always how it is, by the way. Einstein, his whole theories and everything, all came in a flash, or like a flash of brilliance. All the greatest scientists in the world, it's like that. This is another look at it. Here's just a general rendition. There are the base pairs. There's the double spiral. So that's AT-GC, AT-GC. Sometimes it's AT, 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 and then GC, 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 and it goes back and forth like that. Let's keep going. This is it from the top. So when we look down on top of the DNA, looking down the spiral, down the middle of it, we see it has 10 sides. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. There's 10 sides to DNA from the top looking down. Interestingly enough, I've seen that pattern before. I've seen it in radionics equipment. Anybody familiar with radionics? Okay, radionics equipment and radionic wells are usually 10-sided because it matches up to a natural pattern, which is 10-sided DNA. There's also another place where I've seen this, and that is in the structure of the cacao fruit. So if you look here, this is my friend Ben Ripple of Big Tree Farms. I was just in Bali, Indonesia. Anybody been there? Oh, it's great. And right down here, if you look here, there's the different lobes of the cacao fruit. There are 10 lobes of the cacao fruit and actually 5 different segments in the cacao fruit itself. So 10 on the outside, 5 on the inside. And this is just when you slice it in half and look down it in the same way we're talking about with DNA. At the very end of the DNA strand is the telomere. Okay, and that's the telomere. That's what it looks like. And the telomere has got some interesting things going on. Here it's iconically represented. You can see at the middle, this is apparently a mineral, a metal actually, that seals off the DNA at the end. And damage to the telomere is what is occurring due to excessive replication, the Hayflick limit. You ever heard about the Hayflick limit? That there's a certain amount of times that the DNA will replicate itself before the telomere starts being screwed up. And you lose some genetic material, and this has been implicated as a factor in aging, a big factor. And if there's an enzyme present, which is called telomerase, which we're going to get into deeply today and tomorrow, if that enzyme is present, instead of after 50 replications, your cell or your DNA, your chromosomes get 100 replications or 150 replications. So I was doing some research on this just on Google one night and just found out that simple things like vitamin E can double the Hayflick limit for you. Just simple stuff like that, which is really, it's about antioxidants essentially, right? To shield the damage. Because along the strand of the DNA, if you've got the right kind of water, it's all cool. Everything's kosher. But at the ends, there is susceptibility to damage. We're going to go one step further, and I'll evolve this conversation. Because of my knowledge about David Hudson's work, David Radius Hudson, and his work on Ormus, and the discoveries that he brought forth about the telomere and the end of the DNA strand, he's basically saying, and has said since 1980, that this molecule right here, that particular atom that's in the middle, and I'll show it on both sides, is actually a very high spin form of silica or some kind of a weird atom which we call Ormus minerals. Okay, now it's like a metal, like gold, but it's infolded. And if you analyzed it through a spectroscopic signature analysis, which is how minerals are analyzed, it would actually come up and show up as silica. But it's not silica because it doesn't have the chemistry of it. Apparently on the ends of this are these types of minerals, and that allows for superconductivity across the DNA strand. If we don't have those kinds of minerals in our body, then trouble is going to show up. And this is where we have joint problems, as we're going to look at later. This is where we have nervous system problems and immune system problems. One of the reasons why I'm so big on the medicinal mushrooms is not so much for all the amazing benefits to your immune system from the very cursory effects of the antibiotic nature of medicinal mushrooms, but it goes further than that. One of the reasons why I'm really into the medicinal mushrooms is because of the minerals that they contain. They contain unique minerals that are not generally present in the food chain. And those minerals go right there on the end of the DNA strand. Let's keep going. So I was on this phone call, right, doing the best day ever interview. And I thought, okay, I shouldn't have said that. let me go down my bookshelf and find out any books I have on DNA. I better read up on this stuff. I believe in reading. Leaders are readers. If you're going to be an infopreneur and bring the information forth, you've got to be a reader and dig up what is available out there. So I thought, I got to start reading books on DNA. So I was going down my shelf while I'm on this call. I'm answering some other question. And then I'm like, okay, this one. And I pulled off The Cosmic Serpent. And this is Jeremy Narby's book. Listen to this statistic that's in this book. In 1 cubic foot of dirt, like the dirt just outside the parking lot over here, the dirt that you are grounded to right now, right outside the door here, there is enough DNA in the bacteria, in the spores, in the roots of plants, in all the living things that are down there to go around the entire planet. How many times? 5 billion times. Now, if we uncoil, I'm sorry, I went too far there. If we uncoil all that DNA, right, because DNA is coiled up. If we uncoil it and we stretch it out, it will go around the planet Earth 5 billion times. This is 1 cubic foot of dirt. So the Earth is very different from anywhere else in this cosmos that we know of, because its information density is of an order of magnitude that's almost impossible to understand. That's information. And here's the great thing. In 1 cubic foot of goji berries, at a very conservative estimate, if we stretched out all that DNA that's in all those seeds of all those goji berries, it would go around the planet Earth 15 billion times. 1 cubic foot of goji berries, a bag like that. 1 cubic foot of Centrum multivitamins. It's like a zero. It's nothing. Isn't that interesting? So in terms of information, this is what we're after. We're after the information. I love Marshall McLuhan's phrase on this. You guys are familiar with Marshall McLuhan? I became very familiar with him due to a very wonderful man that I studied with when I was in college, who was an older guy who'd come back to college, and he turned me on to all kinds of amazing books. And one of the whole genres of books that I got turned on to at that time was Marshall McLuhan's material. And Marshall McLuhan said that in the future, in the information age, and he saw in 1960 the entire information age coming. He saw the internet coming, all of it. And he said, here's what's going to happen, is that there is only one job left for you in the world, and that is information retrieval. That's all that's left. With the information, then we are able to completely act differently. We're able to think things differently. We're able to have a completely new perspective. We're able to generate entirely new ideas with that information. So in the future, there's only one job left. It's information retrieval. And when we get into DNA, this is what's going on actually at the core level of when we take in a medicinal mushroom or a goji berry or living food, is we're actually getting the information, right? Whereas Flintstone's chewable vitamins, it wasn't cutting it. Now, Pablo Amarengo, who drew those great paintings, and we'll look at a few more, he was inspired, of course, by this plant, which is, that's the ayahuasca plant, that's Banisteriopsis caapi, which by itself is a very powerful medicinal herb, just by itself. When it's mixed with its partner, which is the chacruna, which is this plant right here, then that's where you have that psychoactive medicine that is DNA. And a lot of people report, and this is what was reported in Jeremy Narby's book, that they have seen the DNA strand. So it allows your consciousness to get all the way focused down to the DNA level and see the intertwined snakes and see what's really going on there. And in fact, what the shamans of the Amazon report is that you can alter your DNA with this medicine. This is the look of the underlying chacruna leaf. This is one of the weirdest things in the entire botanical kingdom. You can clone this plant from a leaf, meaning you can just plant the leaf. I'm going to say that again. That leaf, you can just plant the leaf and it will grow another plant out of the leaf. Because underneath the leaf, if you look at it, you see it's got little like bulges coming out. Those eventually will become stems and will become a whole new tree. This is La Chacruna. It's Psychotria viridis, a distant relative of coffee. And this particular class of plants just for whatever reason, because it just shows up in front of me all the time. I've investigated the Psychotria family in New Zealand, across Australia and South America, where it's naturally spread, and it's even probably in Africa. I haven't looked in African jungles yet, but it's there as well. And you're going to see this family of plants showing up over and over and over again for all of us in our lifestyles and in what we're growing, because this is the family of plants that coffee comes from. It's Psychotria, Psychotria, and viridis is the species, viridis. That's a kind of an interesting thing to Google up. And this is, again, some of the images that were talked about in this book, the cosmic serpent. So what he was saying in this book is that this idea of all the snakes and the intertwined snakes and all this thing is really its DNA, and what's going on with the shamans is they're actually able to get their vision down to that level. Now, we think all the time, I think, that my belief is that we've seen pictures of DNA like I showed you, and we don't see it as a living, breathing entity, which it is. So the DNA is always expanding, contracting, coiling up, winding itself up, tearing itself apart in replication, rewinding itself up just like a snake. So in reality, if we were really able to see what's going on in our cells right now, that's what we would see. Here's another image. And if you look closely at this image, you can see it, right? There's the DNA spiral right there. Now this guy's an Amazonian shaman. He doesn't know about DNA. Right? Jeremy Narby brought that information out. Okay, now let's talk about water, because we're, again, wanting to look at that rarefied type of water that surrounds our DNA and protects our DNA from damage. This is Mount Roraima, the inspiration for a film recently that you've probably seen. Does anybody know what that film is? That's right. And you remember the hanging mountains and cliffs and that whole thing where they climb up to get to those birds? It was inspired by this. This is an image of Mount Roraima, and on the top here, this plateau is 9,000 feet, 3,000 meters off the jungle floor, and there are several of these around, 3 big ones and lots of small ones, and this was the surface of the ancient earth, which over time had been spread out and been broken apart, so now there's big, massive canyons and ravines in between, and on top of here apparently is some of the greatest water in the world, and there's so much water just spontaneously forming on top of Mount Roraima that these waterfalls here are always flowing all year round. Beautiful. And I'd recommend that you actually Google this. David Attenborough did a piece on this, definitely worth your investigation. Mount Roraima is Roraima. And the reason why this became very popular in science is because there's something special about the water here. What's special about it? Look at these images. Boom, boom. Do you see it? Okay, so we'll go back again. Oops, wrong direction. Let's see, the other way. There, 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 there. So what is the spiral about? And now I'm going to talk to you about nesting. That this spiral shape, as the information increases in any liquid substance or any malleable substance, it must assume a form of a spiral in order to nest all the information together and densify the information. So this is a Vor trap. It's an Ormus trap. And it's designed to trap a certain fraction of spring water that has the intelligence in it, that has the minerals in it that are at the end of the DNA strand. And it's a vortex that has a straw coming in the middle of it with magnets around it, and most of the water spins down the sink and goes out the bottom. But that fraction of the water under vortex action that moves inward, right? If I spin something around, you'd go, oh no, everything moves outward, right? Like if I took a ball with a string on it and started swinging it around, all the energy is going outward, or is it? And in physics, we learned when I was in college that no, there's a force that moves inward as well. That's called centripetal action. That's the force, that's the substance, that's the liquid you really want to drink. That's what your DNA is surrounded by. And that's the high information content water. And that will automatically take on a spiral formation or a DNA shape when you concentrate it, because that's its very nature. I mean, these shapes just aren't random. Right? The DNA takes on that shape because that's the best shape to assume a huge amount of information. Okay, so this spring right here is in the North Georgia mountains in a place called Enota, Georgia. E-N-O-T-A. Definitely something, if you live in that area, you've got to go up there and taste the water and drink the water. You can drink the water out of the creek. It's 27 parts per million in the creek, for those of us who know what that means, which means it's basically like spring water. Even after it's already been out of the ground for 1,000 meters, you can just get in there, drink it up, and it's like unbelievable stuff. This water is so rich and so powerful in these elements, and this is something I want to share with you because this is, to me, this is science. It's the best science, which is natural science. It's so rich in these elements that actually these elements have to be held down or controlled or anchored by a mineral called silica. Okay, so my opinion about the end of the DNA strand is there's silica holding these minerals in place. These minerals, if they're present without in an unstable form, they will eat into glass in order to stabilize themselves. Does that make sense to everybody? You know, when you see these things like we have over here, organo-living silica, the reason why that stuff's so powerful because it's not just silica. That's made out of spring water, by the way. It's this other stuff that's attached to it. So I'm going to tell you a story. This was one day I was at Day02 Georgia. 2 days after this, I had to go to Maryland, and everybody at this Maryland event was like, you got to bring us spring water in glass. So I had shipped to Day02 Georgia. I had Myron glass, the best glass in the world. Almost every product that's in this whole show is Myron glass. We tell people, it's like, it's got to be in Myron glass. Yes, like, let's see here. Where is the marine phytoplankton? Okay, well, like this stuff. No, not that one. Let's see, where is it? This, right here. Boom, this is Myron glass. Okay? This, Myron glass. Actually, I need that. Yeah, this is Myron glass. Okay? This is the best glass in the world. So what is the best glass in the world? I get it going like this. Trapping it. So a bunch of it's going down the drain, actually went into my bathtub, and I'm only trapping like 1 out of every 50 parts of the water. I want to get that high information dense part of the water, which you see there. It has that very intense, very tightly coiled spiral because it's rich in information. What ended up happening is I bottle 40 bottles of that. We put it in the back of the car. We drive from there to western North Carolina to a little town there. It's escaping me right now. The very next morning at 4:30 in the morning, we drive through the Nantahala Gorge. I jumped in the water. Actually, I slipped into the water. 4:30 in the morning, freezing cold, and then drove 13 hours straight to Baltimore, right into the event. We're doing the event. Everybody's like, "You got the water. This is the best thing ever." What's going on? Then I hear that one of the bottles broke. I'm like, uh-oh, because I know what happens when you trap this kind of water is it starts to eat the glass. The glass itself becomes molecularly unstable because glass is made out of what? Silica. So you start going, uh-oh, something's wrong here. It's like becomes molecularly unstable. I'm sitting like this, doing the presentation, boom, a bottle right there pops and disintegrates right in front of everybody. Then another one 20 seconds later over there. I thought they're all going to break. I was like, oh my God, that's all going to come apart. This is to indicate to you something very interesting. I want to show you a little experiment that I've done. This is more high-grade water. Let me see if I got that in here. Look at these images. This is the nesting, right? I'm going to show it to you actually later. I'm going to get it back later, and I'm going to show you an image that's really amazing. This water, when you trap it and you get that substance concentrated, actually will eat into glass in the same way as if you take metallic gold and push it back into its original form, which is it's in the earth, which is its ormus form, through what you can actually throw molten sodium on gold, which you shouldn't do at home because it explodes. I've had some fun experiments. We'd throw that together, clamp the thing shut, run out the garage, boom! Okay, let's open the thing up. What's in there? If you take that material, okay, and you ramp up the energy of that, let's say you get it near an ozone machine, it will chew into glass. It's the same material. Because we've arrived at it from two directions. If you concentrate the stuff out of spring water, it'll eat in glass. If you take metallic gold or other noble metals like silver and you push them back into their original form, which doesn't appear to be gold, they also would chew into glass, which is indicating that what this stuff is in this water is actually gold. Does that make sense? but it's not in a form that we understand. So really at the end of the DNA strand, what is it? It's gold, but it's not in the form of a metal. It's in another form. And that's how we've been arriving at this this is since 1980. So there's been about 30 years of research on this, a lot of it I've done myself, that's indicating that actually our DNA requires gold. Strange, isn't it? A lot of developments happening, and as we evolve further, what we're going to discover is that some of the great sages and wise people of the past actually knew this intuitively. The great shamans of the world, they actually knew it too. Everybody's known it at some level. It's never been entirely lost. But now it all comes out in our time of crisis, right? Because we have more DNA damage, DNA lesions than ever before. Let's keep going here. Okay, so this is a little bit of a look at the 30 billion gene sequences that are in every chromosome and how it's all layered in there. So if you look at this image, there's our chromosome right there. That's a chromosome, which is all the DNA material. Does everyone see that? Now, that is all coiled all the way up till we break it up right here. That's 30 billion coils in one chromosome. Is that outrageous? How many chromosomes in the human genome? 43 or 46. 46, right? Which splits into 23. And it's 22, and then we have the sex one, so it's X and Y or X and X. All right, let's look at this now. This material then that's surrounding our chromosome, this is where we really want to get that water to. We want to get it right here. Okay, let's keep going because we've got a lot to cover. The nesting that I'm talking about is like that fractal nesting. You ever heard of fractals in the Mandelbrot set? All things in nature are in a fractal pattern. If your house is constructed out of natural materials, you'll sleep well at night. If you're grounded in a natural house, you'll sleep well at night. If you have unnatural materials, like you have a metal roof, because it's not in a fractal pattern, the material is very far from its natural state, then you won't sleep well. And this is one of the reasons why grounding is so important, because it connects you to the infinite fractal of the earth itself. Very key idea. The infinite fractal of the earth itself, which is this kind of a thing. And this is basically looking down from the top into DNA. It all nests into itself so it can hold an infinite amount of information. This is another way to look at it. This is something we've seen before in the structure of snails and the structure of shells, that infinite ability to nest. The more of these objects that you have around you, crystals, shells, all this kind of stuff. I mean, I have, every kind of little gadget, doodad, right? These natural nesting shelled kind of structures, Fibonacci sequence substances, phi ratio substances. The better your house will feel and the better you'll feel. Because those natural patterns, we can't always get them in a city, so we have to kind of bring them in like this kind of shell. And again, it's that nesting that we're really looking for. Here's it in a fern. This is the Hapu'u fern from the Big Island of Hawaii. And this is basically a replication of DNA all over again. You see the patterning there, right? That nesting, the ability to hold the information. And you can see it replicated in the art, of course. Let me go back again. There's the art, and you can see, if you look at this image closely, right in here you're seeing the fern nesting like this. And this is something he picked up. If we go back, right, and then again, boom, it's the same patterning that basically shamanically was picked up here. Okay, let's keep going. This is the fractal pattern again. You see it in all of nature where things replicate self-similar across scale. This is the jungles of the Big Island of Hawaii. Again, that fractal patterning, which we associate with beauty, don't we? When we see that fractal patterning, it's beauty. If we just had like a steel wall versus that, it's a little bit different. Okay? Everything that's in that natural fractal pattern starts to impart that pattern upon you, increases your own energy, is good for your DNA. So whenever we take a substance, let's say we boil it, broil it, microwave it, toast it, broast it, and roast it, is it still in its natural fractal pattern like that? So ultimately, just from the point of shape and structure and form, that we see that by all this food processing, we may be changing the natural fractal patterning of what we're supposed to be putting in our body. That affects our DNA. This nesting idea is like Tetris. Everyone remembers that. Where you get everything, so like stack it here, over here, like that. So you can get more and more and more and more into less and less space. That's nesting. Okay, now I want to talk about DNA and grounding for a second, because the research is now indicating this phenomenon is going on. If you look over here, it says life is fundamentally electromagnetic rather than chemical. This is a theme that we've been talking about. When you ground yourself, your DNA goes, oh, and absorbs the electrons right across the water layers, 10 layers of water, and the electricity shields your DNA from damage. When we're ungrounded, our DNA is left up for grabs. It's affecting our DNA. I was talking with Dan Winters. He came and did an event with us in actually UCI. First thing out of his mouth, he says, if you have ions in the atmosphere, let's say you have an ionizer going on in your room, if you're ungrounded, it's dangerous. If you're grounded, it's good for you. Why? Because the ions need to be able to collapse into an enfolded, a layered, dense, nested form in your body, or your body will go into a free radical reaction. So you see how deep this goes, right? Let's say you're doing ozone therapy, right? If you're not grounded, it's a completely different phenomenon. If you are grounded, it works dramatically better. Let's say you're doing some kind of let's say you have an ozone machine in your room, ozone ionizer. If you're grounded, then you get the result. If you don't, trouble. Because your body can't neutralize the free radical reaction. This is, at the very base level, it's affecting your DNA. So the electromagnetic phenomenon is an instantaneous phenomenon, whereas the chemical phenomenon takes time. So we can't ever really get better living through chemistry. Let's go back again. When you're grounded, and when every child is grounded and where you ever were born, as soon as you took your first breath, at that moment, all the cosmic information is imprinted on you at that location. That's your astrology, and it's in your first breath. Wherever you took your first breath is where you are imprinted with your cosmic information, your astrological information. That has been well studied, by the way. Is it the 49th day of pregnancy? Is it the day of conception that imprints you? No, it's when you take your first breath. At that first breath, as soon as you've taken your first breath, all the cosmic information is imprinted on you. Now, is wherever you first are grounded, that's when all the earth energy comes onto you. There's a difference. Remember last night, there are two things that we could identify here in terms of the forces that we know about. Forces that come from the cosmos to us, forces that come from the earth up. That's all we know about. We can identify all forces in that way. As soon as we take our first breath, we get all the astrological forces. But here's the other piece. The very first time you became grounded, you were imprinted by the location of where you are. And it changed the structure of your body, and your brain and your head and everything is affected by where you first touched the earth. It's called your brachiocephalic index. Let's go back and look at this. Oops, one too far. Meaning the width across versus this over here, that's a ratio. This is determined by where you first touched the earth. So it was found out, great, phenomenal, Franz Boas was a phenomenal anthropologist back in 1910, 1912. He studied American immigrants who came from Europe, and he found out that their head structure took on the same shape as Native Americans if they were born here. If they were born in Europe, it'd be a different shape. Through subsequent research, we found out it's actually where you first touched the ground. So let's say you were born in America but never were grounded. Let's say you were born in an airplane in Newark Airport. Then they flew you over to Europe. And then your mom went, barefoot and was touching you, and suddenly you were grounded there. You would take on that shape. Now, this is interesting to me, because what it's indicating is that the expression of our genetics has a lot to do with our touching of the earth. Okay, let's keep going. We've got a lot of material to cover, and wow, look at this. Okay, here's another look of that sequencing of how the DNA is layered in. If you look at the top up here, you see there's the DNA. Then the DNA is rolled up on the chromatids. Then each chromatid is balanced off with another one opposite it, and then that's rolled up, and then that's all intertwined like this, and that's your actual chromosome. It's like snake inside a snake inside a snake. Okay, so this is the cephalic index. Franz Boas, you can look him up and Google him. Let's talk about the atomic model now. The materials that our body is made up of and that our DNA is made up of is basically atoms. There was a book written by Charles Ulrey called Minerals in the Genetic Code, and what he did is he channeled out which trace minerals are associated with our genetic code, and exactly how many of those minerals are in every DNA sequence. That's how far he went with that. These different atoms, these are DNA, or these are atomic clouds, are basically the same as this picture of a galaxy. Each one of these atoms is like a galaxy. So our basic planetary model, which is like our atom, we have a nucleus in the atom, and then we have the electrons. Okay, what do we know about electrons now? There's a ton of them on the Earth, and we absorb them automatically. If we are missing electrons, then the atom becomes hungry for electrons somewhere else and starts eating other things, and that's called free radical damage. And that's when our DNA gets oxidized, and that's when cancer shows up. Okay, so when we go back here, whoops, this way. These are the different atoms as best as we understand it. You can see that they're not what we thought they were. They're unique shapes, and they're like a galaxy. They're like basically each one is a black hole, essentially. That's Nassim Haramein's work. DNA, mineralization, and longevity. So early on in my career, I was exposed to the work of John Hamaker and Don Weaver, and also, what was his name, Schroeder. Trace Minerals and Man by Henry Schroeder. And what that indicated is that our genetic expression, the way our phenotype is expressed by our genotype, has a lot to do with our mineralization. So from the very first days of being into raw foods, I started getting into, okay, we got to get the rock dust back into the earth, we've got to get ocean water back in the earth in order to get all the minerals available for all our plants so that we can get the proper minerals into our food, and therefore we can be properly nourished. Where I'm at with that now, by the way, is now we're at growing the best foods ever, like goji berry, with the most minerals possible in the best places ever. That's kind of where that's at. That's where it unfolded to. Like, I love lettuce. Lettuce is good, right? But it's not chocolate. So we've been growing chocolate trees from the bean, from that step, all the way with all the minerals, all the ocean water, all the rock dust, all the powders. We go down to the Wailua River, dig out the river silt, bring that back, throw it on everything to get all those minerals available so that that thing can properly express its genetics. We eat that food. What happens to us? We properly express our genetics, and that's where activation of genius occurs. That's where activation of genius occurs. That is the revolution that transforms the world. Because it probably only, we need 1 in a million to actually get there. But if we activate those kinds of geniuses around the world, we can save ourselves, for sure. And it all begins in the soil, which is, right? What's in the soil? DNA, electrons, and minerals. It's all together. Let's keep going. Okay, so then I came across Charles Walter's research and the minerals for the genetic code and the research of Dr. Richard Ulrey. Let me just read this quote. Radiomimetic chemicals, faltering nutrition, injury, and not least an absence of marked imbalance of critical minerals can injure the chromosome by altering the chemistry of a gene so that it conveys misinformation. Now, radiomimetic chemicals is a fancy way of saying nuclear radiation. It's a fancy way of saying depleted uranium. Okay, so it can alter or injure the chromosome, changing the chemistry of the gene so that it conveys misinformation. Now, there's a term for this in science. It's called point mutation. That's a lesion on the gene that caused the gene to be damaged, changes the genetic code, changes the expression, which is essentially a fancy way of saying cancer. And then that can lead to what's called deletion, and the cell may be killed or may reproduce, inducing the error. Again, cancer all over. Sea energy agriculture indicates to us that if we can get ocean water minerals on our soil, which basically the ocean itself is a homeopathic cure to all soil imbalances, then we can not only get the genetics into the DNA code of all the bacteria, the plants, the roots, the spores, the mushrooms, everything. Now I haven't told Paul Stamets this yet, but I have grown mushrooms using ocean water. Now you talk about a revolution in mushroom growing. Because immediately what happens is the mushroom goes to genetic perfection. And you can see it. It's meaning everything is completely perfect. There's not a blemish, there's not a splotch. I've also grown aloe vera to genetic perfection doing this kind of strategy. Just putting that out there because all of us really, what we're seeking at, if you're here in this room, you're seeking perfection. At some level, you are. And therefore, we nest all these ideas in together and start realizing that with certain strategies, being grounded, for example, which is absolutely essential for DNA health, getting the right kind of water into our body, which is really spring water and high spin water, the water that's got that very high fractal pattern in it, getting all these minerals, that when we put that all together and we deliver them through the form of superfoods in a superfood smoothie, a lot of things happen at that point, doesn't it? Good stuff. Let's keep going here. Now, Soren Erekelian was a raw foodist. He is a raw foodist, still going. He's in Russia. And he has the world record in extending the lifespan of chickens. Chickens don't wear shoes. Is there anybody who's going to object on that one? We're all in agreement on that? Okay. So we know they're grounded. Now, here's what he found out. He basically is using 3 strategies, and he's tripled the lifespan of chickens. Okay? He's got a chicken that's like over 20 years old. That's like real, that's like serious, isn't it? It's like world record. Okay. I don't know about the egg part. Maybe. What has he found out? Well, number 1, mineralization is essential. So all food eaten should be of a mineral-rich character. That's personally for me an absolute necessity, or my body rejects it. I don't even want to eat stuff that's not of mineral-rich character. I can eat wild lettuce. I'll eat lettuce that I grow, but iceberg is out of the question at this point. Now, is iceberg better than, Gatorade? Probably. How much DNA is in Gatorade? Okay. 2, eating less, calorie restriction. Here's the secret of calorie restriction. You've got to actually have food that has minerals in it, and then you automatically don't need to eat a whole bunch of food. This is crazy that people are trying to, like Walcott and this other guy who tried to calorie restrict, and it's like, dude, you can't calorie restrict on Wonder Bread because you're going to go into starvation. So that's number 2, is we've got to get to calorie restriction, but we've got to do it in a way that's sane and actually doable. If you are eating mineral-rich food, it shuts off your appetite and it just becomes obvious. Now, this is something that I noticed on this last tour. I was with my friend Bruce Horowitz all the way through. We went through New Zealand, Aotearoa. We went through Australia. We sailed on right through to Indonesia. And this guy weighs 140 pounds. I weigh 186 pounds. He eats more than I do. I'm looking at this and I'm going, huh? And I eat less than 2,000 calories a day. I weigh 186 pounds. Why? How can that be possible? Nesting, density, nutrition density. So the nourishment's actually getting in. So that automatically happens for you. If you eat mineral-rich food, you automatically eat less. Now let's go to 3. He found out that chickens had to eat raw food. In order to get the life extension that they were looking for, the chickens had to eat raw food. Now it's very simple, right? What's number 1? Mineralization. What's number 2? Calorie restriction. What's number 3? It's got to be raw. Okay? Let's keep going here. Let's talk about 3 categories of minerals. This is by way of review. We've talked about a little bit of this up to this point, but let's keep evolving this because I know how you are and I know how I am. The more I hear it, the more likely I'm able to retain it. The major minerals, magnesium, phosphorus, calcium, sulfur, these types of minerals and potassium, these types of minerals are hugely involved in metabolism, they're hugely involved in the DNA, and they are probably comprising most of our structural elements, like carbon, huge part of who we are structurally. So that's the major minerals. Those are necessary that we have a balance of those things. Now, do we get our calcium from a calcium supplement? No. This was great. Where's our camera guy? This is what a calcium supplement is. You guys ready for this? Okay, you ever scrub scale in your bathtub? Okay, now I'm in my bathtub right now. Here's my brush. Okay, I'm scrubbing scale in my bathtub. Here's what a calcium supplement is. Now I'm licking it. But the calcium supplement may be 100 times worse. You guys ready again? Here it is. I'm scrubbing the scale off my bathtub. And it's like, oh, wait, that's calcium. I need to get my calcium. And now I start eating it. One more time. Okay. There's nobody in their right mind who's going to do that. Actually, that scale that's in your bathtub that you see on your hot water heater, and why is it on the hot water heater instead of the cold water? That's the stuff, that's arthritis. That's what arthritis is. That's plaque, coronary plaque. And that's what is going on when you take a calcium supplement. if you eat vegetables, like what's a good vegetable? Broccoli, seaweed, kale. You get the right kind of calcium and you get the balance, and that's really all we're looking for the major minerals. Now, trace minerals. This was Charles Ulry's work, and this is in Walter's book, Minerals in the Genetic Code, and he brings in all the trace minerals and how much they show up in the genetic code. Trace minerals like zinc, trace minerals like copper, trace minerals like selenium, hugely important for the genetic code. But what none of those guys found out about is actually this, which came up in 1980, which is the rediscovery by David Radius Hudson of the Ormus elements. What the heck is an Ormus element? This is that high spin gold, high spin silver, could also be high spin copper, it could be high spin hydrogen, it could be high spin zinc, that appears, according to our normal analysis or our periodic table of the elements, to actually be carbon or silica or iron. So we're misidentifying stuff. Does that make sense to everybody? What do we know about science? What do we know about the history of science? It's changing, right? It's our best guess at the moment. It's always changing. So as time goes on, what happens in the information age? It goes to a level that we cannot even believe. Instantly. This is why I'm telling you, this is why you're here. Because you're like, we're going to bypass the brick and mortar institutions and get right to where is the gold, right? Get right to it. That's what we're up to. So the brick and mortar institutions are going to collapse. They cannot compete with the internet. They cannot compete with this type of education or where science really is at. I'm just putting that out there because you'll go back and you'll tell some scientists, yeah, you ever heard of Ormus minerals? And they go, that stuff doesn't exist. That's a pile of crock, blah, blah, blah. But I know from two different directions, trapping spring water and taking gold and pushing it back, that we're dealing with the same materials because they chew into glass like nobody's business. They disintegrate glass, so it's got to be similar material. Okay, now let's keep going. These Ormus minerals are known to actually nest in with consciousness, or they actually are intelligent in some way, shape, or form. Where they come from is inside the earth, and as they come up out of the earth in sap, in spring water, through volcanic activity like lava, through ocean water currents, they are trying to get to the sun because they're female and the sun is male. They're trying to get up there without being oxidized or inseminated. Putting that out there. You know, the great alchemists understood the earth itself as a dynamic interaction of opposites. We know that that's what DNA really is all about. It's the two serpents in a dance. You ever seen two snakes get it on? That's DNA, folks. That's it, right? If you haven't seen that, YouTube. You know, like your daughter comes out like, Mom, what are you watching? Okay. Hold on one second. Let me just mention this. One of the reasons why the mushrooms are so important is because what the mushroom is trying to do in the tree and what the tree actually is. First of all, the tree fell upward. It didn't fight gravity. It couldn't have. One of the things that occurs is that the mushroom goes into that tree and it takes all of that material, the Ormus elements, the stuff that I'm saying is really important for your DNA, and concentrates it into its fruiting body, which is the part that comes out of the tree, and then eventually forms the spores. And as soon as those spores are released into the atmosphere, which direction do they go? They go up. They're levitative. And what they're really trying to do is fall into the sun, and we know now that mushrooms can actually escape the Earth's atmosphere. At all levels of the Earth's altitude, mushrooms are found, mushroom spores. What do they contain? They contain these materials. What are the materials? The Ormus elements. What do? They protect and cap off the ends of our DNA. Why do they do that? They allow superconductivity to occur down the DNA strand. You see where this goes? It ain't lettuce and wheatgrass anymore, folks. We like lettuce and wheatgrass, but where we got to roll with the times and take it to its appropriate destination. I want to say one more thing. For all of us who are saying, okay, like, where do I get this stuff? Seaweed, excellent source of these Ormus elements. Superfoods, what makes a superfood in my estimation is its ability to concentrate these high spin elements. The super herbs, which is the great herbs from ginseng to reishi mushroom and everything in between. And then, of course, fresh spring water from the source right there. We did our entire tour, New Zealand, Australia, Indonesia, and Japan, entirely on spring water that we collected at sources. Never bought water that entire tour. So if you put that out there as your intention, it's pretty darn amazing what the universe will deliver to you. In fact, when we were in Bali, we actually got onto a property, 40 springs coming out of the ground. And I do want to mention this. You can YouTube search us. My friend Joe Polish was with us. He's friends with our crew back there. Hey, Joe Polish, we love you. He was filming me talking about spring water, and you can Google this, David Wolf saves puppy. And this puppy jumped out of my friend's hands right behind me and basically fell down a cliff and landed on a little ledge down this cliff. And so while we're doing this thing on spring water, I had to climb down this cliff and save the puppy. Now, when I got to the other side to get the spring water and I looked back at the cliff, I'm so glad I didn't know about that cliff before, because that was a 40-foot straight drop and I could have died. But you can see that on YouTube. Let's go one more image here. This is the periodic table of the elements for those of us who are unaware. This is a listing of 2 of the 3 classes of minerals, the major minerals and the trace minerals. Now, what we've learned now is that the periodic table of the elements, which is essentially 2-dimensional here, actually is 3-dimensional. If you turned it and looked at it from the side, you'd find that gold can exist in an infolded form, as I mentioned. So can silver, so can copper, so can nickel. You know where I'm going here. That's the Ormus element. Okay.